Hey, good morning everyone and welcome to atCSIR 2022. My name is Rob Walker. I'm going to be your host for the event this year, and I'm joined in studio this morning for our opening morning by George Mennie from Autotrader. George, thank you for joining us.
You're very welcome, Rob, and thanks for having me. It's really good to be here.
Fantastic. atCSIR this year is proudly brought to you by our two headline sponsors, Autotrader and Grid Cars, as well as atCSIR Automotive. So our thanks to them for supporting us, and George, you guys and Autotrader for supporting us this year, helping us get the message out about atCSIR.
You're most welcome. I think it's important that we actually get the message out around the topic we're going to talk about today. So we're very supportive of this topic.
Fantastic. So you obviously you live and breathe. You drive EV. I mean, you turned up this morning in the studio. You've got a beautiful Jaguar I-Pace.
Thank you.
That's why we felt that you were the right person to host the first morning session with us, because you don't just walk the walk, you talk the talk, I should say. You actually walk the walk. Now, last year in atCSIR, we ran the event, and there was a number of topics that came forward, which I think if we cycle forward 12 years, is we've seen now where we've already become to the point. I mean, one of the big ones was it's a variety of models in the country, which we've seen a number of brands launching. I mean, this week Audi just launched the e-tron. From your side as Autotrader, have you seen this big push in the last 12 months with brands bringing a lot of EVs in?
Yeah, I mean, I think historically OEMs, or original equipment manufacturers, have had a very stark push strategy. So they would push vehicles into the market, and now with the advent of the internet and the advent of EVs, the consumers are more pulling on the OEMs for what they want. So there is this combination of push and pull from the OEMs and from consumers. But what we've seen is consumers are actually leading the charge in South Africa. We've seen a doubling of searches on Autotrader's website just in the last year versus the previous year, so 2021 versus 2020, in terms of searches for EVs themselves. But there's a lot of education to be done. You know, people are searching for Toyota Corolla, Toyota Hilux EVs. They don't even exist. So consumers have a big appetite, and we've seen it starkly in the results.
Fantastic. And one of the other big things that we spoke about last year at atCSIR, and we were quite privileged, we had a lot of guys talking about it, was government and seeing a willingness from government to push into EVs. Now, last year we heard that we were preluded that the green paper was going to be published. A few months later, the green paper has come out. What are your thoughts? I mean, that was one of the big things that came out last year when all the attendees, everyone was talking about, what is government doing? Have we seen enough in the last 12 months to where we are today that people are now believing that government is doing something?
So, I mean, my perspective on government is governments are the biggest monopolies in the world, right?
Sure.
And what comes with a monopoly and with a big entity like that, because you can look at government as a big entity, what comes with a big entity like that is a lot of bureaucracy and slow moving. The wheels turn very slowly in organizations like that. So I was very excited to see the green paper. We've been promised that a white paper will come out of that green paper towards the beginning of this year. I think that's going to happen because Autotrader, myself, we've been working closely with NAMSA, and it seems like that's going to turn into a white paper. But quite frankly, Rob, we don't have a choice, to be honest. So, the deadlines are looming.
Sure. And I think the third big thing that for me came out of it was people talking around, obviously, concerns around energy in South Africa. We all know the country where we live in. It does seem to me that there has been a shift towards South Africans understanding that we don't just have to rely on a single energy provider, that we actually can become self-reliant. And even in the last 12 months, I even saw yesterday, I think it was, Amazon announced their 10 megawatt plant in the Northern Cape has gone live. Are we seeing South Africans becoming less reliant on Eskom and actually saying, well, we can move towards EVs? And I know our keynote speaker is going to talk about it, about e-mobility and solar energy. Is that a big trend that you see coming forward? It seems to be big for me in the last 12 months.
Definitely, in terms of the move towards renewable energy like solar, wind energy, etc. But like anything, the biggest hurdle or the biggest challenge in any country, and South Africa is no different, as a matter of fact, is really regulation.
Sure.
A couple of months ago, we saw the government lift the regulation on what plants can produce from a solar point of view. I think it's now at about 100 megawatts.
Yep.
Before that change, companies couldn't provide energy energy to consumers or to shopping centres, etc., beyond a particular cap, which then left the energy requirements and energy supply up to Eskom. So now that that cap's been lifted, I think we're going to see a lot more momentum in the renewable energy space. From a consumer point of view, I mean, I talk from my own personal experience. I've kitted my house out with solar and batteries and inverters, mainly because I drive an electric vehicle and I wanted to reduce my fuel costs, which I have done.
Sure.
But it's still quite expensive to install, number one. The biggest expense is the batteries. Lithium ion is an incredibly expensive thing. So energy availability is there during the day. Energy storage, I think, is the challenge, and that's where the cost starts to escalate.
Sure, and I mean, I think as you've spoken about, I mean, it's about people being open to these new ideas. I think we're seeing, as Em said, a lot less people saying, can't drive an EV because Eskom can't supply power. I think their minds are starting to open up to the possibilities, to seeing that it isn't just about Eskom or just about government, that there are alternatives out there. And I think maybe the last one, which I think it's always been a question with EVs in this country, is when are we going to start to see a low-income model coming in? Because I mean, I spoke about Audi, BMW's obviously got models out there, Jaguar has models out there, Volvo. From your perspective, an auto trader, do you think that's where the big capture market is in South Africa with an entry-level EV, and when do you think we might see that?
So, I mean, we've put out now the electric vehicle or the EV buyer survey, yes, 2 years in a row. And it's very clear that consumers want a car under 500,000 Rand. So your point is actually spot on in terms of, mass adoption will happen, we think, when that price point comes down below 500,000 Rand. Now, we're starting to see that in the search numbers. The BMW iX, the older small version that is now a second-hand vehicle on Auto Trader's platform, is getting most of the searches. And one of the reasons it's getting most of the searches is because the second-hand price point is now starting to dive below 500,000 Rand.
Okay.
So not only did the research show that, the actual numbers and the search numbers are starting to show that very fact as well. So I think the moment somebody brings an EV in at under that price point, we'll start to see the actual user adoption escalate. Now, you ask yourself, well, where's that going to come from? Because most of these EVs are premium EVs. My Jaguar I-Pace, the Audi e-tron, the BMW iX40, which I drove the other day, let's talk about Porsche. I mean, Porsche is a premium sports car brand. They're all more than 1 million Rand. So I think that if those OEMs don't bring a car into the country at close to or below 500,000 Rand brand new, we're going to see companies like GWM and Aval, the Chinese brands, yes, bring EVs into the country, and that's going to cause adoption.
Fantastic. So I think, to summarize, IMSA 2021, those are the main topics that people spoke about. I think the most exciting one is to see the willingness of government. I mean, our speaker last year, Gaylor, he alluded to it, and a few months later it happened. We got the green paper. I think that people are starting to see that this is going to happen whether they like it or not. And I know you preach the e-mobility movement, you drive the car. What do you think it's going to take? And maybe it's more events like this where we educate people and let people have the knowledge. What do you think it's going to take for us to really see that massive change curve? Because I think what everyone's talking about is that the change curve is happening, and the longer it takes to happen, the steeper the change is going to be. What do you think it's going to take for us to start seeing a mass number of EVs on South African roads? Maybe not, we're not talking huge percentages of the vehicle fleet on the road. But when we can start talking about more than 1 or 2% of the vehicles, maybe start talking about 10%. What do you think is that going to be the price point, or what do you think it's going to lead to get that up? So
I think it's down to three things. Two of them are education based, and the third one is definitely the price point.
Sure.
So I mean, everybody's spoken about the price point to death. What do? We've got to reduce taxes. We've got to give government incentives. We've got to, business has to come to the party as well. The other two are education based. Range anxiety, mm-hmm, and load shedding is a non-event. Okay. I charge my EV for 2 to 3 hours a day. There's no load shedding that in an 8-hour period that's going to last for 8 hours. So load shedding is not a big deal. So education around range anxiety. You can drive these cars for long distances. There are 300 chargers in South Africa, and Audi.
Which I just want to touch on. I mean, that's gone up significantly from even 12 months ago.
Exactly. And Audi has now committed to doing another 70 or 80 in the next 12 months, and they're 150 kilowatt chargers.
So we're knocking on to 500 chargers in the next 12 months. Probably.
Exactly.
Okay.
So the actual charging infrastructure is outpacing the EV adoption. If we talk about when this will happen, we sell maybe 400,000 new cars in South Africa, a local consumption a year. At that 400,000 mark, with 12 million cars in the car park, it's going to take 25 years plus in order to change the car park to EVs.
Yeah.
So that shouldn't be the concern. It should be how many of those 400,000 in a year can we make EVs?
Yes.
Rather than looking at how fast is the car park going to change. Car park's going to change in 30 years. It's not going to be overnight. Everybody's going to be driving ICE vehicles in the next 15 years secondhand. So it's more about those 400,000 a year. How many of those are we? And we're only doing a couple of hundred a year now versus 400,000.
Okay. And I want to try and summarize kind of where we were last year, where we are to now. I think that change curve has dramatically, shifted. If I look at some of the speakers we had last year, people were talking about if this happens, if that happens, maybe this will happen. Whereas, some of the speakers we have now, people are talking about this has happened, this is happening. And the conversation has shifted from if and when to is and now. And what do you think, I don't know, look into the crystal ball. What do you, as George Minnie from Autotrader, what do you think we're going to see in the next 6 months before we jump into today's sessions?
In the next 6 months, we're going to see a lot of supply of EVs. I don't think it's going to meet demand. Demand means the price point has to come down. So there's going to be a lot of supply in the premium segment.
Okay.
You can look at all the cars that are out today. There's going to be more of that.
Okay.
At some point, if we look beyond 6 months, someone is going to come to the country with a lower price point EV. And
that's the Chinese market that you're talking about.
I think the Chinese potentially are the characters who are going to bring the car in. Look at the Haval Jolion.
Yes.
Haval Jolion's an ICE vehicle. It has absolutely knocked the lights out of South Africa.
Yeah.
We are seeing the Haval Jolion searches rise to a point where I think it's going to rival the top 15 most searched for cars in the next 12 months. So it wouldn't surprise me if a Chinese brand does bring an EV in, and then we're going to see the back six be a very different place.
And do you think, let's touch on that quickly, because I know internationally people will be speaking about potentially a low price point EV that doesn't have a massive range that people can use as their daily driver in and around town. Do you think that that's something that we can see? Because everyone's talking about having range 600 kilometers, or realistically, most of us only drive 100 Ks, 150 Ks in a day. Do you think there's going to be an opportunity for someone to come in with a low price point vehicle that only has 300 Ks in a day, because that's going to bring the cost of the lithium ion batteries in that vehicle down, which lowers the cost of that vehicle? Do you think that that's a strategy that we might see someone employing?
It has to be a strategy, because I think it's the only way the traditional OEM can compete. With the likes of the Model 3 Tesla, which has long range, is compete at the price point for the use case of the consumer.
Sure.
And the use case of the consumer is, I don't need a car that can do more than 100, 150 Ks a day.
Yeah.
I look at myself, besides driving here this morning, driving to the office and back, and now, after lockdown with the hybrid working models, you drive even less.
Yeah.
But I'm doing maybe 70, 80 Ks a day.
Yeah.
You don't need a car with more than 150 kilometers of range, which brings the price of the car dramatically down, because lithium-ion batteries are the biggest cost. I found that in my house's solar installation, 90 kilowatt I-Pace. That's what pushes the price of the car up, definitely.
Fantastic. So let's jump into this morning. We have Carel Snyman. He's going to be joining us and talking about electric vehicles and solar energy, applying local electric vehicle experience to the transition of fleets from fossil to solar energy. This is a keynote where I think that this is something that people have touched on. Fleets are an easy win. fleets are where we could actually have easy wins. I mean, they have pretty much set distances every day that they are changing, and bringing in that solar energy. Do you think that this is going to be something which South Africa? I mean, we have more solar days than most countries around the world. Is this an opportunity where we could see mass adoption on a large scale with these fleets?
I've said more than a half a dozen times already, let's not leave it up to the government to do everything.
Sure.
Many companies have the ability to give company cars, to change their fleets. So all the government needs to do is really incentivize the tax benefits of having a company car, and we could see mass adoption happen very quickly by corporate businesses getting involved. So I definitely think there's an opportunity to get mass adoption through fleets, especially fleets of passenger vehicles, because eventually those fleets, where do they go? They go into the second-hand market.
Sure.
And we know the second-hand market is 2 to 3 times bigger than the new market.
Yep.
And so the wheel can start turning. So there's definitely an opportunity for South Africa to move in that direction.
Fantastic. So on that note, George, I think Mr. Carel Snyman is with us, and we are going to stop talking and hand over to him and our keynote address on day one of EMSA 2022, brought to you by Auto Trader and Grid Cards, as well as Cut Your Automotive. Mr. Carel Snyman, over to you, sir.
Good morning. I can't see people, so I hope you can all hear me. I'm going to talk about applying a local electric vehicle experience to the transition of fleets from fossil to solar energy. I have done this myself, and on Thursday I'm doing another presentation at the Transportation SIG where I'll be explaining a little bit more in detail about this. But for now, let's go to the experience, and let's then talk about the ideas and the ways that we can perhaps get to the proper and better situation, away from solar and more towards solar energy. I'm going to cover the experience that I had, of course, at the CSIR in the early 70s. I was doing something else. I was not involved then, but I will start there because that's really where South Africa's history regarding electric vehicles started. And then I will talk about what happened at the National Energy Council. I will cover the work that we've done at Eskom. Eskom pulled the plug in 2002. I went somewhere else and then started PSC Warehouse a little bit later, not 2002, but 2006. Then joined forces with Winston and Grid Cars. We started Grid Cars in 2009. Saneri, I consulted to them when I was running BSC Warehouse and introduced us, and we started Grid Cars. Grid Cars is still continuing. I left in 2013 to work with Saneri and try and convince government that this is a good idea. And when I reached retirement age, Saneri said, "You better leave now. That's the law." And anyway, I have a passion for this, so I'm still continuing. Currently, I'm a consultant, independent consultant, working with various people, but I'll touch on that when I get there. So the early days at CSIR, early 70s, this is the first electric car that came to South Africa. This is a CC43, as you see, so it's in Kimberley. You remember Kimberley was one of the cities that had electricity first in the world, mainly because of the Diamond Rush. And this is a bus that was manufactured during the first electric vehicle program in South Africa in the early 70s. As you can see, one in front of the Union buildings. Then the two main developments that I think stand out at the CSIR, and there were many things that happened there, various papers produced, MSc theses, PhDs, etc. But I think the work that Mike Thackeray did with lithium battery development was a milestone in history. And also the work that Johan Kutzer did with the Zebra battery development was also significant. And we still see that the Zebra battery finds application in this vehicle. It's a solar bus. It's called the Tindo. That's the Aboriginal word for sun. And that is a vehicle that operates only on solar energy. And hopefully we can get there with our vehicles in South Africa as well. It's about a 12-ton vehicle with a top speed of 75 kilometers an hour. And it's got a range of about 200 kilometers. Not too bad for a battery that was developed early in the 70s. Then I started my career in energy and electric vehicles at the National Energy Council in 1988. I gave my age away now, I suppose. But anyway, the National Energy Council put their focus on South Africa's energy balance, and all their efforts tried to improve this. Now, this is not the complete energy balance. I realize that, but to simplify things and to make things clear where the problems are, I just put this together in 1990. So it's also old, but it presents the problems that we faced then. You can see we have a big stack of coal that we're working from. We import all the crude oil. That's the primary energy, and then we convert that at Eskom, the coal to electricity, and also at Sasol, some of the coal to fuel. And a lot of that is also used direct in our industry at that time, much more than today. So that's then converted into the secondary energy. That's our energy carriers that are being used in our economic sectors. And these lines and boxes and things are sort of relational to the amount of energy being used there. And you can see we use a lot of energy in industry, lots in transport, but the production losses is massive. And also the consumption losses is massive. And you can see transport is very inefficient in that sense. And the little circle at the bottom, the green one, that is actually the useful energy. That is the energy that turns the wheels, if I can use it that way, of our economy. And the rest is just wasted or lost in terms of production and consumption. The point I want to make is if we use the incandescent lamp, say for instance, in coal, there's 100 units of energy. When we convert that into electricity, 62 units are lost. So 38 units enter the transmission lines. And being transmitted, 2 units gets lost. And then we start with 36 units to power the lamp. But 43 of those units are lost. And only 2 units produce the light. The 43 units produce heat. Now, that's why we don't use these lights anymore. And I'm sure you've all changed. But the same is true for cars. And I hope now you will have the motivation to change as well from your old internal combustion engine car to an electric car that is much more efficient, as you can see from this. With the internal combustion engine vehicle, only 15% of the energy that's in your tank reaches the wheels and becomes kilometers, whereas you have 80% of the energy in your battery available to power your electric car. Just a quick comparison, if you have a petrol car, say you pay 20 rands per liter and your consumption is about 8 liters, 100 kilometers, you consume 272 megajoules of energy at a cost of 160 rand for that 100 kilometers. If you had an electric car, same size, you would consume only 15 kilowatt hours. You will pay about 2 rands, maybe a little bit more nowadays. And I think in June, it'll go up by another 20%. But it means that you use much less energy, 43 megajoules. So still your price or the amount of money you pay for the electricity will be much less in terms of paying for the 100 kilometers, the energy that you use. What we are saying is you can even go to a smaller car, a commuter car, because you don't really need to take 2 tons of steel with you everywhere you go. And if you have a fit for purpose, right-sized small electric car and use off-peak energy to charge your battery, you can pay 1 rand for that off-peak kilowatt hour. You would consume about 5 kilowatt hours, that's 72 megajoules, and you'll pay 5 rand. Now, if you compare that 5 rand with 160, it is a massive saving. Now, let's take a look at the CO2 production. Of course, the electric car produces no emissions at point of use, but the petrol car does, 20 kilograms. And then you tell me, but of course, there are pollution produced at source. So let's take a look at that. You will see at the refinery, normal oil refinery, you produce about 6 kilograms of carbon for every 100 kilometers of the car traveled. But at Secunda, and you should not forget about Secunda, you produce 40 kilograms. For the electric car at the power station, it's about 15 and 5, respectively, for the normal-sized car and the small car. So the result then is, even if you use Eskom energy, Eskom electricity in South Africa, it's cleaner, much cleaner than using petrol on the Highveld. Of course, in the Cape, it's a little bit different because they don't use the coal synthetic fuels there in their mix. So there it'll be better, but still, you will see using Eskom instead of petrol in South Africa is still better powering your electric car. So then the National Energy Council got disbanded in 1992 with the event of the new government coming. There were changes in government and the people were placed back into civil service. I was not really going to go there. So Eskom said, why don't you join us? Because we need to know a lot more about electric vehicles. So I joined Eskom and I found Peter Langley playing with this little car there, the Enfield, mainly looking at how can we improve the batteries that powered the car, because the car had a very low range. Also, it had a low speed. But anyway, in those days, it was great. I mean, something that is electric, something that you can use as a car. That was fantastic. The main thing with Eskom at that time, and even more so today, is where they sell electricity. Now, the green band, that is selling every kilowatt hour you produce. That is stable, that is base load. Eskom loves that sale of electricity because for every kilowatt hour they sell, they get money in. Now, when you come to the orange band, where it becomes peaky because mainly of commercial and residential demand, it is not as easy to sell every kilowatt hour because the demand is not there all the time. And in the red band, that is where our capacity cannot reach nowadays. And that's why we have the outages in electricity, because we just cannot produce enough electricity that is mainly required by the residential sector. Now, there's a plan that we can make, and electric vehicles can help reduce this problem. In the valley, between the evening peak and the next morning peak, there's about 38 gigawatt hours of electricity. Maybe today is a little bit less, but that's what it was at that time. And that was enough to power 6 million electric vehicles. That was more than our population of commuting cars at the time. Today, it's about 7 million cars, but we can produce 6 million, enough electricity to charge the batteries for 6 million electric cars traveling every day, 50 kilometers in the day. And you can see if we had 2 million cars, we can easily take electricity out of the batteries and supply the peaks that are sitting in the red band. So electric vehicles could really help Eskom reduce its problems in terms of outages and load shedding and these sort of things. It also helps with stability of supply, the frequency stability, and making the quality of supply better to customers. So the first car that we imported to South Africa to learn from was the Selectra Force, and that's why you call it TRI-1. I was working then at Technology Research Investigations in Rocheville, Eskom. This car had an electric motor, was very efficient, worked very well, but didn't have an high speed and was really not that exciting in terms of acceleration. This one was much better. This one was produced by AC Propulsion, the same company where Tesla got their first motors from. We just beat them with a couple of years and imported this converted car from the USA direct, California, AC Propulsion. And we used the same system in that car to convert a number of vehicles to electric. This was a Corsa Bakkie that was donated to us by the people that are called the Delta Motor Corporation at the time. I used this as my commuter vehicle. That was the first choice because we all wanted to drive electric at that time. We also did a game viewing vehicle, converted that. This was a project together with Nissan. You can see the controller, AC Propulsion 100 kilowatt controller box, and the motors below that in the engine compartment, somewhere around there. And then this is the controls in front of the driver in the dash, and the batteries sat below the seats in the platform between the wheels lower down in the vehicle. As I said, it was a joint project. Nissan paid half and did a lot of work on the vehicle. We introduced the vehicle and used the vehicle in the Kruger National Park. You can see foreign visitors came to take a look at what we did in South Africa. We drove them around. The vehicle operated there for 4 years. And then the park decided that they needed new batteries, and that was a bit of a problem. We felt that they earned money using the vehicle and should pay for the batteries themselves. Another company, Barker Performance Products, serviced Land Rovers for the private game reserves next to the Kruger Park, and they were also interested, and we helped them to do a Land Rover conversion. We also did a conversion of a Ford Bantam for eThekwini municipality, who used this vehicle for a couple of years. All these vehicles had lead acid batteries, so the problem with range was quite significant. We also did shuttle bus conversion, old Eskom combis. These were used in various places. This one we took to Robben Island. We thought it would be great if visitors to the island can be transported in an electric vehicle. Here you can see the boat approaching the island. We also took it down in mines, the shuttle bus, to show mines that they can use lightweight electric vehicles to transport people down in the mine. This idea never took on. We also did a Jeep Wrangler conversion, and we did this electric utility vehicle, a little small bakkie, lightweight bakkie, together with Global Composites, the previous Nissan Sani people. And this is the vehicle on a stand in France, the TTI stand in 2002, April. That's a closer look. We even thought that we could manufacture the body of the vehicle out of natural fibers, because the components like the motor and many other of the components in the vehicle can be carried over to the next generation, and the body of the vehicle can then become compost. At the same time, Denel produced this hybrid military vehicle, a tank, 30-ton tank. It had in the wheels an electric motor, 1,000 Newton-meter torque, and the diesel engine was just creating electricity that charged the batteries, and that powered the wheels of the vehicle. A fantastic vehicle. Yeah, you can see it in real life on the Geratech skid pan. And there is this is Wynand Avenant, the main engineer that worked on the vehicle. I think this was a major achievement in South Africa. But the main problem remained the range of the vehicle. You can see the electric vehicle at that time ran out of speed easily, couldn't reach Cape Town, and the battery, the lead acid battery, remained the Achilles heel. At that time, it was around 2002, the oil price dropped to about $10, $11 a barrel. Utilities elsewhere in the world dropped their electric vehicle programs, and Eskom did the same. So I was very disappointed, left Eskom, did a bit of work in IT, and in 2006 started the company called BSC Warehouse. I thought that I could do consulting in business and energy for sustainability. And this is one of the projects we did for SANERI at the time, the South African National Energy Research Institute. This was looking at Gauteng mass transit planning and simulation tool, looking at all the modes of transport that we use to move people, and the costs of the roads, cost of maintenance, all these sort of things, and then dividing Gauteng into transport allocation zones, or bubbles as we call it, and then taking these people using census data at the time from home to work and putting them into various transportation modes, linking them to various ways of walking, cycling, riding, using public transport, etc. And with this model, then we could optimize what would be the shortest or the best solution in terms of time, cost, energy, and pollution. And we also looked at the performance of these various scenarios, and you could calculate then, in this case, the time for the morning commute took about 773,000 hours. The cost was 2.7 million rands. We used 5 million megajoules of energy and created all this pollution, traveled that distance, and we moved that amount of passengers per kilometer hour. And that also showed us what happened with the modes in terms of performance. Petrol car, megajoule per person kilometer, is about 2.19 megajoules per passenger kilometer. The orange is ton kilometer, so don't compare those two with each other. Stick to the same color. But if you compare the car with a taxi, you can see the taxi is much more efficient compared to the car. And that's because the taxi carries more passengers. And the same is true for the freight. You can see here, with the smaller vehicles carrying freight, it's less efficient than heavier vehicles carrying freight. We can also see in terms of pollution, the major contributors were the car population and the heavy freight vehicle population. These sort of interesting results came from that study, and that helps you with planning in terms of a region. The region can be a province or a city or whatever the case may be. Another interesting project that we did at the time was a BRT bus design. At that time, BRT buses became popular, and working with Fraunhofer, a German design company, energy company, we designed this bus with the intent for production in South Africa if anybody would be interested. I think it's a very nice bus. This is the propulsion system design of the bus. The diesel engine, again, was only a generator, providing electricity to power the wheels. The wheels were also generators, recuperating braking energy and charging the energy supply unit or the storage unit of the vehicle. At the same time, we saw the rise of optimal energies, looking at producing the joule, mainly aimed at the export market. It was a very interesting project, but we can talk more about that in question time. In 2009, Saneri actually introduced me to Winston, and together we started Grid Cars. We put together a workshop at the CSIR looking at producing various vehicles, including this one, which would have been a two-seater commuter vehicle that you do not own. I wish I could see your faces. I wonder if you like it. Maybe you can show me some reaction somewhere. It would have been a vehicle that was lower than half a ton, seating 1+1, had a good speed, very low cost of operation, and you don't own the vehicle because I'm sure you don't want to own a small vehicle. You rent it, and it is made available for you on various contracts. So there you can see at the bottom right one of the prototypes that we produced. This is the design of the drive system, how we drive it. You can see the big gear in the back to get the right gearing ratio. This was an old motor that we took out this Electroforce, one of the Eskom vehicles. You can see how the vehicle compares with a normal car. That's the body that the vehicle would have had. And here you can see Dinesh from the Automotive Industrial Development Corporation going for a test drive. He also drove one of our three-wheelers that we built. Three-wheeler had a back that you can change. In this case, you carry people. In that case, you can carry freight, and this drums can contain water or compost. The client, in this case, had a bucky with a crane to lift the drums. We designed a system that you can just roll the drum into a frame and put it forward so that you can transport it. Here we did a Chinese thing. This is a Chinese vehicle that we converted with batteries in the back, motor in front, and there you have our main test driving the vehicle. It was a very successful conversion. Like all the vehicles that we did, the vehicle conversions just worked very well. Here, Nissan kindly provided us with a body of a NP200. We used a motor from Selectra. They don't exist anymore, but that was a motor that we had from the Eskom program again. And we put lithium-ion batteries in the back of this vehicle. Worked very well. This was a fun vehicle that we built, just a frame vehicle, a bus conversion, manned bus conversion. That's the motor position in the bus. We also built the first solar charging station in South Africa. And we demonstrated that at the CSIR, used it to charge our own vehicles as well. So all of that we showed to be possible. And then I started work at Saneri in 2013, looking at, I was the general manager of the Cleaner Mobility Program. So it did not just include electric vehicles. I had a look at all sources of energy to power our vehicles in South Africa, looking at alternatives that are cleaner than petrol and diesel. And the idea was that we could grow our own fuel using various crops. And we calculated that the best you could do was about 50 gigajoules per hectare per year. But if you compare that with solar, where you can produce, I think nowadays, almost 2,000 gigajoules per hectare per year, it just shows you that that is not really an option. You cannot grow your energy. Solar beats biomass 40 to 100 times. And even if you look at all the pathways to produce fuel, it doesn't really make sense. And if you try it, you should not use anything like canola or any of these things that you grow, but you can use algae. That's maybe the best fit. And you could do this at power stations. The water is nice and lukewarm. There's lots of carbon. That's what the algae need. They are limited in their growth by the lack of carbon dioxide. We also looked at the potential of biogas, and we have lots of resources in South Africa, more than enough to power our total public transport fleet. And looking at that, when you look at where do you apply the gas, it looks like the best return is when the biogas is a substitute for petrol. We looked at the kilometers per hectare again of all these things, and PV electric just beats everybody hands down. This is the range that you can get with an electric car, solar powered, and that is what you can get with the others. And this was a German study done with a Volkswagen Golf that they converted to electric. We also asked a question about hydrogen, and the main problem is the efficiency of the conversion process. The energy you have left after you've powered your vehicle. very similar to the petrol car, maybe twice as efficient as petrol car, the hydrogen fuel cell vehicle, which is essentially an electric vehicle powered by a fuel cell. But with batteries, you can see you still have a much higher efficiency. The process is also very complex, refueling vehicles with hydrogen, and very expensive. And it's possible, of course. This is atCSIR in Korea. They have done it. They've shown that it's possible, but I would not do this. It doesn't make economic sense. I don't believe hydrogen is a solution for mobility. And here's just another example showing that. If you use direct sunlight to charge your car, you have 73% of the energy that you can use for mobility, whereas you have only 22 and 13% if you try the various routes with hydrogen. This is real life, a Tesla, a Toyota Mirai, both vehicles that are available, you can buy them. Just comparing the refueling cost, the range of the vehicles. It's always been said that with fuel cells you can go a long range, but I think batteries can reach there already. And then they've said you can do this with trucks because the battery will be too big, but I think with modern trucks we see that they can meet the range. I don't think fuel cells will find application there. And then the price per kilometer is way lower. It just makes more sense, especially if you have a fleet vehicle, to go with battery vehicles instead of fuel cell vehicles. And then you have to keep in mind that there's not just one type of hydrogen. There are various. And it doesn't matter what color you paint it. There's only one green hydrogen. The others are not really clean. And this you cannot do with a fuel cell or a petrol vehicle. You cannot plug your house into your car, which is something that you can do with an electric vehicle. I calculated that if I drive to my office at Snyman, plug in my car, go to my meetings, plug in my car again before I go home, then drive home, even with a battery, a small battery of 24 kilowatt hours, I could power my home, because my home consumption at night is only between 5 and 6 kilowatt hours. So I could have easily plugged in my home into the car and then powered my home, get my energy the next day again from work. Even if I paid for that at work, it would have been cheaper than paying for Eskom. So at Snyman, we put together this charging station. This was a project that GridCars did for us to show and demonstrate that you can, with solar energy, charge the batteries of electric vehicles. And of course, these chargers don't have to be fast chargers, because the people that work at the IDC spend a lot of hours at work, the same that I did at Snyman. So that's where the ideas came from, and that's why we did the projects, to show. And with the IDC, because they should invest in industrial development and they should push these projects. That was our thinking. But we thought further, and if the vehicle was not a big vehicle, what would you need? And if it was a small vehicle traveling 80 kilometers per day, it would consume about 4 kilowatt hours. So you would need a small installation of 5 times 200 watt panels. That's about 10 square meters. And that would cost you approximately 30,000 Rand. You can see I've changed the slide because the price came down. That would have been a one-off cost for 25 years. And that is good for 500,000 kilometers, 500,000 kilometers, at a cost of 6 cents for the infrastructure. You can also think now, if you want to scale this up, the cost of this infrastructure would not be as expensive as it would be for any other refueling system like the one that we have today, or even if you think about hydrogen. What's my time like? We are not the only people that know about. Okay, we're not the only people that know about small cars. The vehicle manufacturers have also got their prototypes. I need to go a little bit faster. And then we compare your vehicle with your home, and you can see if you have a petrol vehicle, you pay for your commute about 109 Rand, where you pay per day about 25 Rand for electricity. That's Eskom electricity. But if you use electric car, you come on par with your home. But I still think that should not be the case. You should pay less. So you should right-size your ride. And that makes us talk about the waste in terms of using right-sized or normal-sized cars. We spoke about the losses of energy. Also, your car is parked 92% of the time. Maybe you should think of using something else. It also kills a lot of people on the road and creates a lot of waste in terms of road space in cities. So then you start looking at the energy and start understanding how you use energy. And I'm not going to spend time on this, but the target should be then using about 10 megajoules per 100 passenger kilometers. And this you can do in a personal rapid transit public transportation system. And when you start thinking about these things in this way, then you start thinking about future cities and smart cities and sustainable cities and all these sort of things. But at that time, we had a project with the African Development Bank to look at these cities and develop these cities for Africa, because Africa is going to have an explosion in population growth, and we don't really want the slums. We want people to live in a decent way. And at that time, Senedi pulled the plug. We had a proposal with African Development Bank going into feasibility and due diligence, but I had to leave Senedi, and that's where that was. I still want to do that. What I'm doing now is I share what I know with whoever is interested. Maybe I can summarize it that way. I do consulting, and that's my logo at the bottom. So I'm driving electric. You can see the consumption rate that I got between this charging station of Gridcast. Thank you, Gridcast, for that. And this Patcham place, that is a bed and breakfast in Clarence. My consumption between Villiers and Clarence was 9.8 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. And the average speed was not too low. It was about 80 kilometers an hour. So it means you should drive sometimes at 100, sometimes at a 90, but I limited to less than 100. And I find interesting places where I can charge my car. I've never found anybody denying me a chance to charge off a normal plug. So I don't think we should be limited in South Africa in terms of traveling if you have an electric car. People are quite friendly. And even if you offer to pay, sometimes they might tell you, no, they don't need the money, because when they realize how little it is that you are wanting to pay them, they say you could have it for free. That was my experience. I'm also looking at solar energy because we need to combine this. And this is my graphs of my solar energy system at home. This is the sun coming up in the morning, charging the battery first. But there's always other loads or clouds that is limiting the sun. In this case, this is the geyser coming on. It's on a time switch. And the same at the bottom graph. The scale is not the same, so just don't get confused by that. And then on this day, I left the battery to charge first. There were a few clouds. And then the geyser heated up. And then I still got a normal geyser. We'll soon fit a heat pump. And then this should drop to about there. This is the car plugged in, and this is the dishwasher coming on, and that's the afternoon coffee. This is the same, yeah, just we didn't have clouds, so the sun produced early, and you can see in the afternoon it went down. That's about the curve. If you had the full curve here, if I used all the solar energy, it would have produced more. I plugged in my car, then I left for a meeting or someplace. The geyser came on, I returned. The dishwasher was on when I plugged in the car. I also made myself a cup of coffee, and then it went down again. But you can see there's a way to manage this. I'm not quite sure if you can see that, but you can. You don't have your loads to be on top of each other. You can plan that. And we need to find a way to use the energy that I'm not using at this stage, which would be sitting on top of these curves, or below this sort of graph that I draw here with a pointer. And these are things that are still in development, and the control systems for this, you do find some on the internet, but they are not all exactly what I want. I'm also working with guys that, okay, so I'm currently working with a fleet in the Western Cape. They would like to convert their whole fleet to electric. We are looking at the demand of electric vehicles in the world and the projections. We understand the Osborne effect in the auto industry, where you find that the internal combustion engine vehicles will soon not be available anymore, and you'd have to get into an electric vehicle situation faster. It's important for fleet owners because you don't want to sit with redundant assets that you cannot sell. Who's going to buy petrol vehicles when nobody wants them anymore? So the planning there is quite important. And if you look at the UK situation, on the left, you can see the graphs for diesel and petrol. Already 46% of the 47% of the vehicles have got some electricity in them. And I think this is going to increase fast. You can see the real figures here, really very similar to the Osborne effect that I've showed you. So this thing is real. You don't have to guess about this anymore. And I believe these times of you running out of internal combustion engine vehicles is going to come closer because of stricter Euro 7 regulations. That's going to make it impossible for petrol or diesel vehicles to comply with the regulations. That means they might not be available until 2030, but will be phased out earlier. And this is just Bloomberg confirming that. Also, we see the batteries are coming down in price. Again, there's a guy called Wright's Law that is confirming this. The prices of the cars will also then get cheaper. And we believe by 2023, we'll be on parity. But we have to build a whole ecosystem, and that's the challenge that we're sitting with now. We need to have partners, and we need to develop a new economy. Doesn't matter where you are, if it's South Africa-wide, Western Cape, Natal, we need to build this, we need to find the partners. The infrastructure is appearing, home charging stations are there. We need to think about looking at recycling and repurposing batteries, our own manufacturing industry, and getting cleaner power sources, solar energy, to power our rides. Thank you. If we design it right, we will fly. That's what I believe. Time for questions.
Fantastic, Carel. Thank you very much. I mean, really, really interesting. A lot of data there, I believe. I do have a question that come through. People asking, will the slides be available post-event? Yes, they will be available. So all that information, the data, guys can download. Carel, I've got a couple of questions for you there, if you're with us, sir.
Yes.
Fantastic. Carel, one quick question. Somebody's asking, did you not also work with Optimal with a well-designed Joule that was going to be designed and manufactured in South Africa? Obviously, maybe a fan of yours.
Well, I'd like to claim that. I had various discussions with them, but I was not on their payroll. Let me put it that way. I have been around for a while, and it's very nice for people to then talk to me because of that. Let me just put it and leave it there.
Perfect. Now, Carel, we got another question. The green paper that government published with NAMSA and their report talks about new energy vehicles. Can you just give us a very brief summary? What is defined as a new energy vehicle according to that paper?
Well, the name new energy vehicle we get from China. They are talking about new energy because that's the change and the transition that they have to go through. And then electric vehicles essentially are new energy vehicles. But in the green paper, the new energy vehicles also include electric vehicles that are not powered only by batteries. You find they also include fuel cell, and they like to call it alternative fuel vehicles. But it really includes fuel cell vehicles. But you have to remember that fuel cell vehicles also include a small battery. So essentially, in that green paper, we talk about new energy vehicles as fuel cell and electric vehicles, battery electric vehicles.
Fantastic. Now, touching on that, I know George has got a question based on what you've just shown us with all that data.
Yeah, so Carel, thank you for that. That was very insightful, and as a matter of fact, I'm gonna go and look at this after the fact again, because there was so much data there that you've got a wealth of experience and knowledge. So thank you. My question is more around you. You've just taken us through a journey that proves that battery electric vehicles and solar energy are the most efficient way to go for the future. Why would countries and specifically South Africa and in the green paper be talking about new energy vehicles when the data clearly shows that things like hydrogen are far less efficient, biofuels are far less efficient? Why are we not skipping directly to battery electric and talking about battery electric in things like green papers and white papers? Is it because we're trying to be an inclusive economy and allow everybody to play? What is your perspective there?
Well, I'll quickly touch on the inclusive comment that you made. You can be inclusive if you do have the money to do that. If you have extra money lying around and your country has got excess, then you can be inclusive. But if you're in a situation where you really need to make every rand or every buck count, I think you should go for the best solution that serves the people of the country the best. Now, that question is a difficult question. Why does it not happen then that way? And I've asked myself that question many times. And the easiest thing to say is the knowledge is not there. The people have not read wide enough. The people maybe do not understand the whole calculation. The people hasn't seen it enough. I have not been talking to enough people. We have not made the message clear to enough people. That's one thing. And it might be that. But clearly, and I've seen this, I think there's also other interests at play. And we see that now in the war that is going on in the world as well. Sometimes there's misinformation because of personal interest. And we need to be careful about that in South Africa. We cannot afford that. We need to make sure that that we go for the best solution. We cannot stick to coal and other energy sources, while clearly we are one of the countries that is blessed with surplus solar and surplus wind energy, renewable energy, where we should be going. And we have seen that the work opportunities there is immense. I mean, there's a lot of work available for people if we move in that direction. We cannot protect industries that should be phased out. And clearly there, we got to take care of the people in those industries that will be phased out. They need retraining, they need reskilling, and we need to plan for that as well. We cannot just leave them behind. That's not what I'm saying. We should also train them, but we should move to the better solution as fast as possible.
Fantastic. Carel, I know we've only got a few more minutes. You're a very busy man. One quick question. I'd like to encourage all our users on Zoom to keep the questions coming. We'll try and answer them throughout the day. But Carel, a question directed at you. Seems like South Africa is still behind in manufacturing of EVs. Do you believe that the SA automotive industry can still catch up? And I'm going to give you 1 minute because I know it's a complex answer. Do you believe that our industry can catch up?
Well, you got to have the will to catch up. I've showed you in the conversions, and really the conversion is not comparable with a normal fancy Audi or BMW or whatever. It's a base thing, a very, very basic thing. I've shown you with a very small team of people that are not really the highest skilled automakers, that we can make cars that can be used out there. We can convert vehicles, and we've done that. I'm not saying we should go convert vehicles now. I'm saying we should establish a local industry in South Africa that start manufacturing utility vehicles, buses, taxis, bakkies, these sort of things, which are not that aesthetically important in terms of the buying decision. In terms of the vehicle industry, of course they can catch up. They just have to make the decision. But South Africa is not an attractive market. Our government policies are keeping them out. Nobody's going to see an attractive market with the taxes on electric vehicles and no statement from government saying that they want electric vehicles in South Africa.
Fantastic. Carel, I think we're going to have to let you go because our next speaker is getting lined up. But thank you very much for your time this morning, sir. I know you are a pioneer in the EV space in South Africa. You've kind of been around, done it all. And hopefully you will still be around when we are driving those lovely fleets of electric vehicles.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the invite. I plan to stick around.